That's an interesting question. What sort of person he's believed to be? What we do know is that he is a rebel leader. He's a leader who has had a vision or a belief that he is fighting for multi-democracy in Uganda, to bring the rights of people to the forefront, to oust Yoweri Museveni, to have people allowed to elect somebody. But as an individual, he says that he is fighting for this cause under the Ten Commandments, biblical Ten Commandments, that he's following the spirit world and what God has advised him to do. But he is, along the way, has broken every single one of those 10 commandments.
Yes, because of course one corner of that picture that you painted there is that some of his followers believe that he is a man with mystical qualities.
I think this is something you will find across Africa. Having been born and raised in Africa, you find that specific leaders will put themselves to portray a specific power to instill an element of fear and authority over the followers. And the way he has done this is that he has escaped death numerous times, which has led to that belief to be further enhanced. We still live in a society where magic, science, and religion are still very much a dominant force. So he's utilized that aspect of religion and magic for the mysticism. And beyond that, if you look at the followers, a lot of these followers are people that are either being oppressed into following him, so they follow him out of fear, and you can brainwash. A lot of these people are young people who can be brainwashed significantly to believe in what he says.
But of course the reality is that there is a darker side, the killings, the torture, the rape, the attacks against civilians.
Well, I watched a couple interviews by Joseph Kony where he's denied having any involvement in that, saying that these have been the troops of the Ugandan government who have blamed his troops, the LRA, which we all know is false. Nobody would admit to committing crimes as he is trying to avoid. But yes, they have abducted a lot of individuals, a lot of young people. Kids from the ages of 10 onwards have been abducted, ordered to kill their parents in front of them to show that they're going to fight for the cause. They've been indoctrinated and brainwashed to follow what he believes. So this is against the whole values of human rights and what we value in our society.
Absolutely. I wonder if you might comment on talk of him being one of the great poachers of elephant tusks and other endangered animals. That's apparently how he makes his money now.
I think to say great poacher, I think he's come into a point whereby he needs to survive. The LRA, the numbers have been depleted, and their resources, they were funded in the early 90s by Sudan. So right now that funding is no longer there. They're looking at sources of funding. So they found through poaching illegal ivory, there's a market for that. The black market is still thriving in terms of ivory. There's still a lot of corrupt officials who allow him access to markets. So this is what they're utilizing. His sons, just not too long ago, the American government put financial sanctions on his sons who are leading this operation. So I think it's become out of a necessity of survival.
Now, he's one of the most wanted in Africa. The big question is, where is he?
I think that's a very good question as to where exactly he is. If people knew where he was, we would have hoped that he'd be captured by now. But the rumors still circulate that he's still around South Sudan area. He's in the Central African Republic. Some are suggesting if you're going to Sudan, southern Darfur, which is where he's based. Kafia Kingi, one of other areas. So, but I think nobody really knows where he is. The question is also, is he still alive is another question.
Absolutely. That's a very good point. I mean, my producer was telling me earlier that he knows somebody in South Sudan who told him that there's an LRA camp right next to where he is.
Wow, that would be very fascinating. I think the problem is the world wants to find Kony. Now, the challenge that we've had is that we have had a lot of international forces go in to try and look for Kony, but this is an African problem. There may not be that emphasis to really go and seek out for him, apart from the Ugandans, but also in terms of criticisms that I've come across, where some individuals have said that, well, if they find Kony, it means that the Ugandan army will not be receiving the funding that comes into it to sustain them.
That's a good point.
So that's a criticism, but we also need to factor in that the tactics that Kony has utilized has been surviving in the jungle, a terrain he knows best. A lot of these armies coming in are not used to those terrains. These are places that he is adapted to, knows how to survive in those terrains, knows the goes and areas not to go to. So a lot of these teams going in there will be facing these challenges.
Absolutely. So the search for the elusive, shadowy Joseph Kony continues. But beyond that, now that we've got you here, let's broaden things out a bit and tap into your wider experience as an African affairs analyst. I mean, look back briefly for us on Africa in 2016. Have you struggled to find hope in places, for instance, like South Sudan that we're talking about just now?
I think South Sudan is a little bit problematic. In the sense that it's one of the youngest nations, only formed in 2011. We've seen the factions between the President Salva Kiir and his former vice president. So these problems are Mashar. These problems have gone on to the extent of tribalism and ethnicity between the Dinkas and the Nuers. And we've seen the conflict erupt. 2013, there was a bit of conflict. They reached a peace deal in 2015. for Machar to be reinstated as a vice president. And then they had a fallout again in April this year. And this conflict has gone on. We've seen thousands, hundreds of thousands of refugees go into Uganda. So there is a challenge there. But just was on Christmas Day, the president, Salva Kiir, announced that he's going to go through a national dialogue of bringing peace. But we've heard these narratives. I think
yes.
It's about time South Sudan really gets itself together. The people there have gone through a lot of conflict over the years. It's about time that there's peace there.
Right, and of course the question is whether or not he's the right person to convene this national dialogue.
One of the issues there is that he's formed a committee, and for the dialogue, that committee cannot be biased.
Absolutely.
So he's formed that committee, and that will bring a lot of problems to
Absolutely.
it.
Well, let's move on and get your take on what you might have seen that's positive for Africa in 2016. I mean, what's the hopeful, optimistic note that you can strike for us going into 2017?
I think we have to remember that 2016, we actually saw a lot of elections take place on the continent. If I recall, I think there was about 20 presidential elections that took place on the continent. We've seen both sides of democracy being followed. We've seen that in Ghana. We've seen that in Benin. We've seen the challenges in Gambia, Gabon. But regardless, DRC, which is still ongoing. But looking at the promotion of democracy, we've seen a changing tide of the nationals of these places demanding change, demanding more accountability and transparency. So I think that is hope, that we're seeing individuals have more access to information, are more optimistic, and are demanding more from their leaders. Now it's up to the leaders to actually realize that this is a changing tide. So that's one positive I've taken out of 2016. But beyond that, I would also say that for a lot of nations, we've seen that to function, it's heavily reliant on government. But we've seen individuals come in through private sector social enterprises, seeing that we can actually drive forward development. We don't need to rely on governments. And we look at Nigeria, for instance, Tony Elumelu, what the initiatives he's carrying out,
yes, absolutely,
which is developing the next generation
Heirs
of leaders.
Holdings Limited.
Exactly.